30 dates. So it's,
Well, that stinks.
Cheese cloth.
yeah, working on rebooking, but, it's a long
Too
process.
bad.
Yeah.
6 feet away from you.
Yeah, I'm hot.
So are we 6 feet?
I'm pretty sure we're.
Yeah,
all
I think we're good.
Yeah, I don't-
We're good. Okay.
Yeah.
Are we recording all this? Or-
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Are we
she-
good to
She will be
go?
ready whenever you start.
Okay, I
Yes.
think we're ready. It's past time. So Kelly, why don't you give us an overview of everything and we'll jump into this.
Yeah, good morning. Kellen Seitz, Spectre Venue Management, the Stormont Vail Event Center. We're here today to present our fiscal year 2021 operating budget to you, the Board of County Commissioners. What I wanted to do this morning was spend some time talking about not only the budget requests, but our current financial situation and amongst the COVID pandemic and kind of how that played into our 2021 budget request, and then take some time for any questions and answers that you might have. In the meantime, if you see something that pops up while I'm speaking, please don't hesitate to jump in and ask away. But right now, our budget request for 2021 obviously has a significant impact with the pending pandemic that is currently still hindering some of our operation and is likely to look at hindering some of 2021 as well. We are currently requesting a net operating subsidy of $936,732, which is significantly higher than in past years. And I'll get to some of that here in a minute. In fiscal year 2020, our budget request for operating subsidy was $660,252. So we're up about $270. But right now, we are seeing a negative variance in our current operation that exceeds that $270,000 mark. And some of that, and primarily all of that really, is related to event revenues. We've had a significant number of events through this pandemic that have either canceled or rescheduled and are still rescheduling and canceling as we continue through our operations here as we near into the fourth quarter. We do have the optimism that a lot of those events will come back in 2021. But some of the things that we've accounted for, that we were holding dates for in 2021 that have changed even since we submitted the budget, are things like Cirque du Soleil dates in 2021 where we were holding those. They have declared bankruptcy, Chapter 15. I'm not sure how that is going to affect their touring model in the years to come. We do think that they will be back on their feet and up and running again. I'm not sure if it's going to be for the 2021 year like we had budgeted for that type of content. And that's the type of thing you're going to see as we continue to navigate through this booking landscape process. One thing I did want to touch on, yeah, go ahead, Betty.
I'm sorry. Can I ask a question here?
Yeah.
You said you are requesting subsidy of the $936,000.
Correct.
What the commissioners need to know,
Yep.
that with the incentive fee, that is $1,164,768.
Correct.
He's talking about just the operating subsidy, and then we have an incentive fee that is part of the contract based on their income and
Yep.
those kind of things.
So-
It is an incentive, for them to bring in more revenue and those kind of things. And right now, what they're estimating, that would be $228,000. So their total
Correct.
request to the budget would be $1,164,000.
That is correct, and thank you. I apologize for not pointing
that's right.
that
I
out.
just wanted to clarify.
The incentive for fiscal year 2020 was budgeted at $325,379. We have reduced that incentive as it parallels with revenues generated. So as opposed to the previous management contract under the facility, there is no monthly or annual management fee that is tied to our account. We are strictly based off of our revenues, and there's a revenue benchmark. It's set at $1.7 million annually, and any revenues that exceed that revenue benchmark go into a collective pot with a sliding scale for incentive paybacks.
Kellen?
Yeah.
We knew going into 2020, even before the COVID, that 2020 was most likely going to be a short or down year due to the renovations. We had a limitation on the ability to use Domer Arena. We knew that we were
Yep.
going to have a limited use of Landon Arena. We knew that we were going to have really limited use of Exhibition Hall as we're doing that expansion. Now, obviously, with the COVID, we've been able to have, the only upside to the COVID that I can find is that with all the events canceled, we were able to do a lot more work uninterrupted and maybe even get, knock on wood, I think this is wood, ahead of our timeline and get our repairs done maybe a little bit faster than what we would have originally anticipated. And I don't know what our supplies are coming in at, I haven't seen them recently, but watching our supply costs of the construction.
Yeah, so with COVID and the venue closure, certainly helped advance a lot of the scheduling process of our renovation project. They have been able to operate and go full bore on the renovations with 4 months uninhibited progress. So we've gotten a lot done in that time frame, which we are hoping bumps up that delivery schedule to us. They're not committing to that as much as I try, but I do anticipate that we will be taking delivery of a fully renovated facility much earlier than previously anticipated. To touch on the fiscal year 2020 budget and kind of how things were operating before this came to a grinding halt, if you will, we were actually doing very well. In our first 2 months of operation in the 2020 year and the first week of March, we were ahead of budget by, I want to say close to $40,000, a little over $40,000. So, whereas last year in 2019, we were hindered very, very quickly with a lot of unforeseen circumstances with ice storms and snowstorms. So our indirect expenditure costs were up, but also correlating to that, event revenues were down because patrons weren't traveling into those events during those storm times a year. We didn't have that situation this year, and we started off the year with a pretty sizable budget variance in a positive way. That came to a halt with the Kansas Kids Wrestling event, which was the first event canceled, and then we closed the venue just a few short days after that. So we were operating fairly well. We were on pace to hit our numbers. I feel confident that we would have came in at that operating subsidy for 2020 in the $660,000 mark, but given the circumstance and the event revenues just not coming in, we've now projected a subsidy for this year of closer to $1 million. We have been able to do a lot of cost mitigation strategies that include postponing service contracts, include furloughs of full-time and part-time staff employees, and that has saved, just on the indirect expense line item, about $283,000 that we've been able to realize over the past 3 months. That was through the end of May. We'll realize a bit more as we get through financials in June, but the reality is, without having those event revenues, it's very hard to maintain a financial stability.
As you begin to ramp back up into production, are you anticipating a loss of many of the furloughed employees? Do they move on to other venues, other opportunities, or are you anticipating that the core of your group will return?
Right now, we are bringing back our employees in a two-phased approach. One for health safety, and two for, again, compounding on those cost mitigation strategies. We brought back our first phase of employees on Monday of last week, which would have been June 29th. All of those furloughed employees that were brought back in that first wave, which were 8 full-time employees, as well as all of our full-time, part-time staff, did return. Now, our part-time staff won't be returning for scheduled hours and operation until they are needed for events, but we have seen all of our full-time staff in that first wave come back to us. I think it's probably a little early to tell on some of that. We'll likely, look at the possibility that we might lose a couple folks, but I think our core, we've remained intact. We did develop early on in April what we called our essential management team, and kept them on as we worked through not only the renovation processes, but also the rebooking and rescheduling and financial production and event coordination through this time that we've been closed. So I don't anticipate a big loss if that's
Okay.
more of the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kellen?
Yeah.
Since we're talking about 2020, I think this might be a good time. Kellen and I have talked several times, I think, about this, but in our contract with Spectra, we have in the contract, it does say if there are unforeseen events in the economy or whatever that happen, they can come back to the commission and ask for an adjustment to their subsidy that we pay them. What we have talked about is that, not knowing now what it's going to look like at the end of the year, I've really kind of asked them to let's hold off and see how this goes and what happens throughout the year, but just before we come back to you to do that. But I want you to know that we've had that conversation. Our contract does specify that within it. And so it may be something that we have to come back and ask for contingency funds to provide them additional subsidy for this year. So I don't know an amount yet, and hopefully that amount will improve, but just want you to know that that is something we have discussed, and I've asked him to kind of hold off for now, rather than just, speculating what it might be.
And I can expand on that in just a little bit more detail. Right now, through the end of May, we are off our financial projections as our financial budget at about $40,000. But as we move through the end of the year and we realize that lost revenue opportunity from a lot of the events that we have scheduled to come up on the calendar that are no longer going to be taking place, and the ancillary revenues that are tied to those events, that's where we're projecting closer to $1 million subsidy, where our budget number is $660,000. One thing we've tried to do is really take hold of those cost mitigation strategies, which is why you've seen we've been able to realize that variance of about $280,000 in indirect expenses. Now, one thing that Betty and I have talked about on how we might be able to manage those additional costs are with the budgeted incentive fee. The budgeted incentive fee, again, for this year is $325,379. And I think where we are rolling in at, if you have it in front of you, 91,000 is what we're projecting that incentive to be at the end of this year. So there is a significant difference there where, since that money is already budgeted and allocated, that can be the closing gap for some of those additional expenditures in our operating subsidy. We're trying to do everything we can to not ask for more subsidy than you've already budgeted and allocated for us. But I will be very honest with you that potentially might happen.
But if we get to the end of the year and we have contingency funds that are not allocated, and again, I know we're talking about 2020, not 2021, but in respect to 2021's budget, can we set up a project, again, I'm just talking out loud here, but is it able to establish a project fund knowing that there's going to be a shortfall for 2021?
We cannot set up a project fund for operational costs. There's different ways of doing it. We can, you as a commission can set up a budget where the expenses are higher than the revenue, And you can use, and not, what do I want to say, that you can use reserves to cover some of that difference without raising a mill levy. That is one option. You can also look at maybe if there's other items within their subsidy that could be set up for a project for whatever, reason. We do have their capital outlay fund that we have for them. If there would be things that could be transferred, into money for that would not be paid out of their operating budget, but we cannot set up a fund for operations. There may be other ways to work around that, but, just to set it aside for operations, we cannot.
Okay.
Okay, as we move through the rest of the budget narrative here, if I can get it to work for me. The main difference that you're seeing, again, is the difference in event revenues. The event operating income, which are our event revenues, and the ancillary revenues that are tied to that, things like ticketing fees, things like food and beverage, things like parking fees and merchandising fees and things of that nature. We're obviously projecting for quite a bit of a decrease than we've seen in years past, just because we can't anticipate the booking landscape will stay the same as it has been, given all of these circumstances that have changed the booking landscape as we currently sit today. We do have a couple pieces of business that are coming along nicely. One is the anticipation of a MASL expansion team. The MASL is an indoor professional soccer team, or league, excuse me, that is looking to bring an expansion team to Topeka. We have negotiated out the deal points of that contract. There are some underlying stipulations that still need to be resolved, one of which would be the turf field playing surface, and I think I've spoke to most of you on this. But one thing we will be looking to do if we enter into this agreement and get a contract signed is to look at adding in a turf field playing surface as part of our renovation costs and some of our add alternate and additional funding sources that we can potentially have coming through the renovation project. The estimated cost of that turf field right now is around $80,000 to $90,000. So it'll be something that we have to take a hard look at when we start going through our finances and figure out if that's something that we can do through that or come back in form of a capital request.
Does indoor soccer require some kind of a border around it, like you do hockey and
Yeah,
netting?
so they do. They do play inside the dashers for the most part. The dashers are the plastic walls that
Same
that go
dashers
up.
as hockey?
Same size and same dashers as the hockey. Yes, yeah.
Okay.
A little different on the end zone where they have the goals. Some of those dashers are out, and they just have the straightaway dashers down the sidelines. But it's specific to each league individually on what their size is. But for the vast majority, they all play within the same size restraints as an NHL or a NCAA ice sheet, which is what we have.
So I know, like with hockey, it was costing us $10,000 to put the ice in every time, and then the
Correct.
utility costs of the cooling the building and whatnot.
Yeah.
With just the dashers, I mean, do you have an estimated transition cost on that?
Significantly less. Yeah, quite a bit, by 3 times. We're looking at anticipated just operational setup and tear down costs closer to the $3,000 mark, $2,500 to $3,000 for something like that. There is still a significant amount of labor that goes into getting those turf field rolls out and rolled out, but significantly less time and significantly less indirect expense and energy and overhead utility expense than operating the ice plant.
And maybe these are questions for another day, but would they be using the Landon as a practice facility as well?
Right now, only during the times where we had the turf laid down where it didn't inhibit production of other events, which, quite frankly, isn't very often. They would be looking at additional outdoor and indoor spaces for their practice facilities in Topeka. Yeah.
Kellen, just with the indoor football league, the football league owned or brought in their own turf.
Yeah.
And then when they left, they took their own turf. And your proposal is that if we were to go with the MASL, that we would have the cost of the turf, and so that it's going to be our turf.
Correct.
And so if the MSAL was to move on to a different league and leave the facility, we're going to have this turf.
We're going to have the turf, but we would also be looking at acquiring a turf that is dual purpose, a turf that would allow us to do things not only like MASL soccer, but also every league of indoor football, indoor lacrosse, indoor field hockey. We could utilize the turf for many different ways.
Is
than
it
just-
something that you would also contemplate even using, in the governor's banquet, you had both the exhibition hall and Landon Arena
Yeah.
opened up due to
Mhm.
space capacity.
Correct.
And the Landon Arena was, the concrete floor, even with the, lights down.
Yeah.
It just didn't have quite the ambiance that
Sure.
it had the ambiance of a arena.
Yeah.
It is what it is. And so would you contemplate using it for some of those galas or indoor as we get back to that point?
Sure, I think that would make certainly a different atmosphere, and yeah, I think it can be used a lot of different ways. So I certainly wouldn't position this in front of you as a expenditure for the building that is solely for one purpose only.
Where's your storage going to be?
We have realigned our storage as part of our strategic plan during the venue closure to account for much more storage under our, which would be the north wing of the tunnel system.
Okay.
So a lot of our storage has been moved to the exterior satellite building of what we refer to as our south storage building, which is shared with Shawnee County Parks and Rec.
Okay.
We have realigned and reorganized a lot of that, so we have plenty of room for not only our basketball courts, but turf field, as well as tables and chairs. And then we have an expansive amount of additional storage going in with the renovation project underneath the new northeast expansion, as well as additional storage that is primarily taken up by banquet tables and chairs that are going to be going into exhibition hall storage rooms.
Finally, when we're talking about this turf and looking at other ancillary resources or potential revenue, have you engaged in any conversations with Washburn University or any of the school districts about being able to use that as a facility for tournaments or play or games?
Yeah, so we work very closely directly with Visit Topeka and their sales team to acquire national bids for things like NJCAA, NCAA Division II, NAIA sports tournaments. So those are things that we are actively pursuing, not directly with the schools themselves, but we are talking to Washburn about some other potential opportunities, things like hosting their commencement ceremonies and graduations and in our facilities during the time of social distancing. Nothing has been decided on there yet, but those early conversations have started.
I look at Shawnee Heights. I mean, Bettis, we have a Parks and Rec revenue for Bettis for the baseball leagues. And so
Yeah.
I just don't know if that potentially could be a resource with all the different
Sure.
school leagues that we have in Topeka for. It's never going to get rained out.
Yeah, yeah.
But playing on turf is not playing. I mean, again, there's a lot more that goes into soccer than just throwing down turf.
And the size, I think, difference is going to be a challenge that we'll have to work with. But, for things like, practice time facilities, when we have the turf down, we've done a lot of that with the ice sheet. So I think working with those secondary groups to find opportunities that can also be revenue streams for the venue are certainly things that we will explore.
But they would have to be revenue generating. I
Yeah.
mean,
Right.
if we're gonna spend
Yeah.
$80,000 on it, I don't wanna overuse it, if, you know.
Sure, sure. Yep. No, I
noticed
agree.
that this is an 8-game season with indoor soccer.
Correct.
And how does that compare in revenue with a 28-game ice?
So it depends on the deal structure. We are anticipating revenues in roughly ballparking here, because it's all based on attendance and ancillary revenues, but we're anticipating revenues of anywhere between 40 and 60,000 on an 8-game season. When we bump up to a 10-game season, we can anticipate annual revenues closer to $100,000.
I like the idea of indoor soccer because as opposed to hockey, we already have a fan base for a big fan base for soccer.
Yeah.
We have so many kids that have played for years here,
Yeah.
and I really think you're gonna pack them in there for a soccer.
Yeah, and we do too. The main concern is making sure we're still able to be on track and produce that type of content as the year goes on. I did talk with the expansion owner of the team that is looking to come to Topeka yesterday. The league does have a meeting on Thursday, but he feels that they are still on track to start their preseason in November through December, and then their regular season games would start January through March.
All right. Any other questions?
No?
What, do you have any events going on currently? Is there anything at all you can do out there at this time?
Yeah, we do. Court dockets start back up next week for the county courts, and we have events starting up next weekend, larger public attended events, things like the gun and knife show, things like the Ladies' Day Out craft show. We have an equine show taking place in the arena starting next weekend. So next weekend is really when things start to pick back up for us. We do have content, like I said, still on the books for some of that September, October, November timeframe, and even into December with things like Mannheim Steamroller, things like Casting Crowns, things like Paw Patrol and Baby Shark. Those are still on the schedule as of now. They have not rescheduled yet, but you know, it is a possibility that that could continue to happen. But right now, for starting back up purposes, we are getting back into the swing of things come next weekend.
Yesterday, we had the Fair Association here.
Yeah.
And they talked about their 2020 budget and how they're moving to a virtual fair and utilizing, I think they were using Ag Hall for this year, as opposed to the Landon Arena or Exhibition Hall.
Yeah.
But for next year, they were talking about moving from a little over $30,000 to the mid-40s, and I think 43,000 is what I recall. A pretty significant increase. Is that what you're looking at projecting across the board, not just for the Fair Association, but for any group or events that want to use that sort of combination?
The Fair Association is unique in the fact that their rates haven't changed in the last 3 years. Our rates are changing on an escalation period of 2 years. With the Fair Association in particular, their rates have been pretty steady for the last 3 years since I've been here. I would venture to say that it probably didn't change much before that either. We're trying to get every reoccurring event producer up to the normal sliding scale that we're working off of, and that's part of that rate increase. We have worked with them this year to decrease their rent and give some rebates back because they're not using Landon Arena. But the reality for the Fair Board is that we still have a lot of labor force that is associated with their event, with changeovers on a daily basis for those spaces. They are using all of the Domer facilities, including the stall barn, the warm-up arena, and the performance arena, as well as all of Ag Hall. They have shifted out of Exhibition Hall and Landon Arena for this year, but you know, as we get further into the years to come, we're trying to get, and we're not just doing that with the Fair Board Association. We have a couple promoters that have been a little reluctant to move on the sliding scale of rate increases, and they're not big increases. They're basically inflation increases that go in along with the 3% escalation or inflation increase that we see annually.
Mhm.
Anything else? I had bought tickets to Baby Shark, knowing my 3.5-year-old grandson would be in town during that time period.
Yeah.
Not knowing anything about it. And then so I Googled it and found the most ear-offending theme song I've ever
Yeah.
heard in my life, and I dodged a bullet there, I
Yeah.
think, but.
You're not the only one. I think I was fairly nervous coming into the office after I booked that one because I was pretty sure the staff might run me out. But it is a great piece of content. We've had a lot of success with the family shows in our market and the spectacle type shows, and so those are things we're continuing to fight and strive for.
So there is one other bright spot to the coronavirus other than our construction scheduling. All right. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Well, we got the health department at 10. I don't know if you've heard that Baby Shark song. But
Oh, yes.
I didn't even know what Baby